and welcome to Among the Jungle podcast. I'm botanist and host, Shai Kaina, and I'd love for you to join me as I interview the incredible plant people of Instagram to create an audio vault of inspiring botanical knowledge while harnessing a deeper connection with us in our natural world. If you're ready, it's time to inspire your wild. Welcome, Jungle Dwellers, to episode 4 of Among the Jungle podcast. Today, we're exploring 3 generations worth of agricultural business success with Shane Maloy, our beloved Pink Princess Philodendron dealer at Gabriella Plants in Oviedo, Florida. Not only is Shane the friendliest plant person around, but what he and his team are doing at their nursery is truly so heart-centered. And you can see that in their plethora of successful nursery practices, many of which we touch on in this episode. We are giving you guys a close personal look at what it's like to run a nursery and what goes into being the largest U.S. grower of Pink Princess Philodendron for the past decade. Today, 3 things we're going to learn are the history of Gabriella Plants and how it's exploded over the past year, how to get the most out of variegated plants like Pink Princess Philodendron and Variegated Monstera. And lastly, insider information that helps you become a more educated consumer. And honestly, so much more. We're covering a lot in today's episode, so let's go ahead and welcome Shane to the jungle. Welcome to the jungle, Shane. I'd love to dive right into the history of Gabriella Plants online and all the different phases it's experienced over time.
Yeah. Well, our history goes back quite a bit. I'm 3rd generation agriculture. So my dad has a degree from the University of Florida in horticulture. And my grandpa, although he didn't have any formal education, was also very into plants. And during my dad's childhood, as well as my earliest childhood, the parts I don't remember. He had a retail store locally, selling plants and those types of things. So the business has kind of morphed over time, but I'm 3rd generation agriculture. The property in which Gabriella Plants is located on has been in the family for quite a number of decades at this point. My grandparents moved to Central Florida after my grandpa quit his job at National Cash Register, selling receipt paper of all things. So they moved to Central Florida, bought this essentially vacant piece of land. There weren't a whole lot of trees. There was kind of an old outhouse looking shack building. They started working on the house and started planting oak trees. And, everything that Gabriella Plants on that property is now was done by my grandparents back then. And my dad, when I was 2 years old, purchased it from my grandparents. And his kind of goal with his life is he had seen how many questions and how much social interaction was required to run the retail store. And my dad just really wasn't interested in that, kind of an introvert, which is also where my heart's at too, believe it or not, through this interview. But so he wanted to go wholesale with it. So he started building commercial greenhouses there. The business first started on that property with my grandpa calling it Gabriella Grows Gerber Daisies.
Love that.
And it was a professional greenhouse, but it was a fairly small greenhouse, and it really didn't serve much purpose other than to hold plants that weren't healthy looking enough to be at the retail store, and then also grow his Gerber daisies. When my dad took it over, they started building, full size commercial greenhouses, and that's where he went with his life. And throughout him, as my entire life growing up on the property, we typically grew somewhere around 12 to 15 different species, most common Pothos, Philodendron, Golden, Marble Queen, all those, as well as a number every year. About the back half of our space, we would grow roughly 5,000 Boston fern hanging baskets every year. And he had done that wholesale his entire, career. And he had played off and on in politics in Central Florida. And in 2016 decided to run to be the clerk of court in Seminole County. when he assumed that office and won that office, he had already had an entire stock and spring, inventory in the greenhouse that he wasn't going to be able to sell through. So I stepped in really as a temporary thing, no long-term commitment, just to make sure that we were able to either sell out what we needed to sell out and close it down, or sell it out and find somebody who was capable of running it for Dad and kind of move on that way. But I really started to enjoy what I was doing more and more. And when I started hiring additional help, a lot of which were my friends, best man at my wedding was with me from day one when I took over in 2017. Awesome. And, I really enjoyed what I got to do there. So I don't know if you want me to ramble right into how Gabriella Plants became, but that's kind of the backstory. So there's been multiple generations there. My grandparents still live just 5 houses around the corner. I guess my grandfather passed away earlier this year, but they still live just a few houses away, which is pretty cool because you still get to see, grandma will still come in and see how things are looking and stuff like that. So it's always nice to still see the 3 generations that the business is made up of.
What is grandma's favorite plant?
I don't know. I think she would probably, if my grandpa was still living, she would probably say orchids, just because he put so much effort into maintaining his orchid collection.
Aww.
For her. I don't know how deep or like how much orchid. I would assume orchids are her favorite plant, but knowing how much of a gentleman and just an incredible wife she was, I would imagine she played along too, even if she really didn't like it. So she always put a lot of effort into her azalea patch, though, both at the front of Gabriella, which has kind of looked worse over the past couple of years, but in front of her house, as well as the Gabriella property, there's always been a rather large patch of azaleas that she always worked on growing up. So that would probably be my guess, is either orchids or azaleas.
That's beautiful. Now, Gabriella Nursery was selling a lot of the things that you previously mentioned.
Well, it was Gabriella Growers. Sorry, I missed
Gabriella
that. Yeah. Gabriella. So it became Gabriella Grows Gerber Daisies to Gabriella Growers, which was the wholesale business my dad ran. And then what we're doing now and what I run is Gabriella Plants.
And what shifts in your business model since you've taken over the business do you think are responsible for like this sudden growth and expansion that you guys are experiencing?
Well, the kind of backstory to how we got to Gabriella Plants, like I mentioned, we've been growing 15, or so variety species of different plants over the years. And I didn't really buck against that when I first came in there. I'd grown up around that being the kind of catalog that we grew. And I just continued on with that plan. And one of the plants that we had grown that entire time was Pink Princess Philodendron. And we had initially gotten those stock plants when another greenhouse closed down. She called up my dad and said, "Hey, you got to come out and take a look at these things. They're kind of hard to grow. The stock plants I have aren't in perfect condition, but, basically we'll give them to you." It was very, very cheap what he paid for them. And so he brought those in, didn't really know what he was doing with them, but started working on propagating them. So we had grown those for about a decade. And obviously with the overall just plant uptick in 2018 that you kind of saw across the board, partly fueled by, the millennial generation getting into plants, partly fueled by Instagram, those types of communities springing up and being really active. Pink Princess, for the first time in my entire life, started flying off the shelves because they just never were a great seller previous to that. So we sold through Pink Princess all spring long. In fact, that's where most of Hertz and Logi's, when they did have Pink Princess in stock in 2018, those were from us. So we were growing those and shipping them across the country. And about summer of 2018, I said, this is far before Gabriella Plants, I said, "Hey guys, the wholesale business clients, I'm not going to be able to sell anymore for the rest of this year. I need to start rebuilding stock because I'm now at a third of the plants that I started the year with." So, of course, they kind of said, and we moved on. So I started rebuilding the stock. And then it didn't take long before that following fall, brokers to start calling and saying, "No, but seriously, how can I get my hands on even just 15? Can I pay you a higher price for them?" And I said, "Well, that's odd because in the wholesale business, nobody offers to buy your plants for more money." So I took that information, went and for the first time in my entire life, Google searched a plant. I had just never done that my entire life. I Google searched it, found Pink Princess, and found that the cuttings were going for $80 and up. And I said, hey, there may be something to this. So I took a couple pictures. I made a logo, put the name Gabriella Plants because I didn't want people to get confused with the wholesale business and the online business, the retail side. We'd never done retail in the past. And I made that whole logo in a matter of about 30 minutes that afternoon and had posted my first 10 Pink Princess to Etsy. We didn't do any type of marketing, anything like that. But they sold out in a matter of a day just from people searching Pink Princess on Etsy at the time. So of course that came with the like sticker shock of like, oh, but I'm going to have to figure out how to ship these. Now that's a whole nother thing. So that was a struggle too. And slowly but surely, the community really started to embrace me and what our business was. So at first, we were only selling, a handful of Pink Princess on the Etsy store. And before long, we were selling more and more of what we grew. To get to your actual question, though, as we went into this year of 2019, we've gone from growing the 15 or 17 species, somewhere along that line, of the traditional plants that we would grow. And by the end of this year, we ourselves will have grown over 46 species of plants and have bought in and resold or stepped up, cared for another plant before selling another 17 species on top of that. So we've certainly widened what we're doing, and we have even more plans going into next year, growing a lot more Rex begonias, growing a wider variety of syngoniums, more philodendrons, including the Birkins. We're going to be growing a lot of Birkins next year as well. So we've really started to expand what we want. And that was all really just based on the honest conversations I've been able to have with our customers since day one. I got put in some of these different Facebook groups, and now we have our own called Gabriella Plants Behind the Scenes. And those groups were a really great resource for me to be able to say, I'm thinking about listing this plant. Is anyone interested in this? Or just seeing other people asking, does anyone know where to find this plant? So we slowly but surely have been figuring out what we want to grow. But yes, we've far expanded how many different plants we offer throughout the course of Gabriella Plants, which was September 2018 through the present.
Wow. So just a little over a year. And a lot of that has been you just really engaging with the community and kind of seeing what the community wants.
Yeah. And there's a lot of plants that, we still operate wholesale. And I will say that with a very big asterisk. We still service some of our existing wholesale customers. So at this time, we're not really taking on new wholesale customers, but we do still service some of those accounts. No, we're not selling Pink Princess to them, but we still get some of our common items out to those guys. So we are blessed to be able to drive around, the Central Florida area. Apopka at one point was the foliage capital of the world. So we drive around there. See a lot of plants that we haven't seen before. And, this entire year has kind of been a process of, ooh, that looks interesting. What is it? And of course, they, that grower would explain it. And I'd say, okay, well, I'll take 15. I don't really know if they're going to sell or not, but, I'll start out. And some of those items, it took us 3 months to sell out 15 of them. And other items we knew within an hour, hey, we got to go back to that place and see if we can get more of these. Or figure out how to grow them. So it's been nice to be able to not only get the ideas and kind of throw some of the operational stuff by people in our Facebook group and just the plant community in general, whether it be Instagram, our email newsletter, that we're pretty transparent. But it's also been cool to be able to see what other growers are growing and being able to use them as a resource too, because if they're growing the plant, they know how to take care of it. So it's a lot more community-based than people would think.
So going into this new phase with Gabriella Plants, what would you say makes your nursery stand out? What's your mission?
Well, the tagline I came up with in that 30 minutes that followed that Google search was, we ship our plants straight from our greenhouse to your house. It had kind of dawned on me, and I wrote that not really thinking of the implications. I wrote that, I just thought it was good. I've always kind of been a good copyright person. I've always been pretty good at that, especially working on multiple campaigns throughout college. So I got pretty good at that. And it wasn't until a couple months later, I really realized how profound that tagline was. And this isn't to say anything negative about other people and how they choose to run their businesses, but a lot of the other plant vendors online, not individual Etsy shops, I'm saying bigger established companies than we are. a lot of those, and Amazon would be included in some sense, a lot of those are literally just buying in plants from Apopka and holding them either in a greenhouse or in some cases even warehouses with grow lights, those types of things, until they finally sell. So I always thought it was a unique perspective that we not only do the plants come literally, we pull them off of a bench from the greenhouse up until maybe an hour before they're shipped from our location. They are sitting on a bench in the greenhouse, loving their life. And then we take that plant, we package it safely and ship it straight to your home. And most packages arrive in 2 to 3 days. Sometimes it can take us upwards of a week to fulfill all the orders we have. We try to limit our inventory of what we post so that we can do it within a week. But I really realized later that from our greenhouse to your house, the other thing we have in that is we have an entire greenhouse, and often there's the same species of the same plant on multiple different benches. So our staff will go through and literally find the best 10, of that pothos we have to make sure that the best 10 are going to go out that week. And we can constantly swap out inventory from other inventory that's on benches that may look better. So we're not stuck to just the quantities that we ordered in because we're growing ourselves. So I think that's really been what's kind of made us stand out. The other thing I think that would really make us stand out is the fact that we're so responsive, whether it's emails, Instagram, social media, all those outlets. I really try to not only respond to emails quickly to rectify issues with orders as quickly as I can, but also using those outlets to be super transparent. Like I mentioned, the behind the scenes Facebook group. I mean, I go in there and asked, hey, what are the things you want to see in future YouTube content? What are plants you're interested in? Is anyone else having this problem with a plant that we shipped? Trying to identify different problems, different ways we can improve. And the customer base has always been really, really good at not only giving good feedback, which I think is sometimes missing in a lot of customer service interactions, not just about plants, but in general. You just get somebody who's upset about their order, not that's really trying to point out how you could have done it better. And I think our customers have always been really good about saying, hey, I can see you really tried to do this good. This is what I think maybe went wrong. So they're very helpful in that sense. But I think also because we're so transparent, the amount of encouragement that those customers and those supporters are able to give us, whether verbally or written on comments or whatnot, that encouragement really goes a long way in giving somebody like myself and our team who have, just over a year under our belt now. And most of the team wasn't hired until 2019. So still less than a year under our belt. Gives us a lot of confidence that I don't think we would have otherwise.
That's so inspiring what you guys have accomplished as such a small team. And you guys also get a note that says who picked out your plant. That kind of personal connection, just knowing that another person was on the other end, eyes on it for you, and receiving a plant in your home that's been happy till the day that it shipped out, like you said, living its best life. There's a total difference when you bring a new plant home and it's a plant that's been grown with love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, our packing team does an incredible job. I definitely like the fact that we call them the packed by cards. They indicate via signature or a printed name who picked out your plant, and then also who was intimately involved in packing your plant and getting it all in the box, putting the postage label on it, all that jazz. So not only who, as you mentioned, cared for your plant previously, but you also know that it was somebody who cared enough to also write their name. And I don't really ever want to get away from that because I think that's cool. And I think it's a way for employees to take pride in what they do. I got to sign my name on that packed by card because I packaged those plants and they made it safely. So, and to see the customer base again, get those packages in, whether they're posting on social media or whatnot, and, saying, thanks, Juliana, thanks, Gabby, whoever was involved in packing their plants. That's really cool. I think that's really unique.
It is incredibly unique. And just a note, Gabby is not Gabriella. If you watched Gabriella Plants' interview with Heart-Shaped Leaves on YouTube, they mentioned that Gabriella Plants was actually named, in the original Gabriella Grows Gerber Daisies, was named after Gabriella Lane, the road that they actually reside on. So just a little clarification that Gabriella is not Gabby and it's not Grandma, but it's the name of the road that the property was built on. But getting back to what we were saying, your guys' growth has just been absolutely incredible and your transparency has been awesome to watch. So I just saw that you guys posted today that you are potentially moving into your new space soon. So is that coming up in the next couple weeks?
Yeah. It's been a long process. We've known, it all happened so fast, and it's interviews and things like this that really make me kind of look back on the last 12 months of my life and see the roller coaster that it's truly been. But we knew, in January we were celebrating just having orders at all, and just trying to figure out what we were doing and making sure we could get them out in time. And we were even shipping plants in the dead of the polar vortex because us Floridians weren't used to having to check the weather about what was happening across the country, because as long as it's, not sweater weather, that's the only really question you need to know in Florida is, do you need a sweater or not? Not a jacket, just a sweater. Do you need a sweater or not? So we were shipping plants out through the polar vortex, and believe it or not, we only had 11% of those orders have any issue of any kind, which was pretty unbelievable. But when we hit around May, we do inventory updates. For those of the listeners who do know and don't know, another thing that makes us different is we've always been very public about when we're going to be updating the inventory on our website, which typically is every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we release a graphic ahead of that that includes the plants that are going to be on that drop. It is first come, first serve. So there's some people who miss out being able to purchase one, but we prefer to just let people know when things are going to go compared to some of the other websites. So that's always been a good thing, but we've known also that we can drop our inventory on Wednesday, and starting back in May, it'd be an hour later and we'd already be at maximum capacity for what we could ship out of our current packing space, which used to be called the Shack. It's an old horse tack shed from way ago that we were just able to put a wall air conditioning unit in and put some desks in and kind of make the best use of. But that tiny 360 square foot room is the total number of plants we can ship out of there every week is 800. So we have to limit what we post on our website based on that limit. And like I said, we would typically reach that limit, within an hour of posting the inventory. So it's been on our mind for a really long time to finally, expand and have more room so we could have more than 2 or 3 people working on packing orders at one time. So we launched a building project. We used money that we had saved up throughout the year, as well as money that we collected for the Pink Princess pre-orders when we rectified that wait list, and built an incredible 3,000 square foot office and packing facility. So we're super excited about having that building. The capacity probably won't become a real issue again until spring, my assumption. But either way, it's going to be really nice to have a space that feels bigger, not quite so claustrophobic, and more importantly, lets us have more incredible, caring people working on packing orders when we come to spring of 2020.
That's absolutely amazing. And that's such a good foundation to move forward on as your business is growing and expanding, and as you plan to expand your staff in 2020. I mean, that's just a great foundation for you guys to work off of.
Yeah, you make me smile with expand staff, because in my mind, I went from January of this year having 3 people on payroll to having 11 total, with about 8 of those people being full-timers at this point. So we've already expanded quite a bit. And, I am excited for what's ahead. And, I think now that we're kind of slowing down and going into winter, that's why when you reached out to me about this podcast and I listened to some of the other episodes, I really wanted to do this. And we also had I have a couple other interviews because, now that we're slowing down, plants aren't growing quite as fast, orders are much more manageable. I'm trying to get out there and make sure that people know not only about us, but more importantly, how much care really goes into each one of those steps. Because it's hot work in a summer greenhouse where it's above 110 degrees to be out there filling pots for multiple hours at a time. And it takes dedication from people who really care about not only the plants, but also care about the business and the collective thing that we call Gabriella Plants to make that happen. So everything I'm able to say or claim credit for, really a lot of that is credited to the incredible team we've assembled throughout this year.
Yeah, I don't think that a lot of people who are in other parts of the country really understand what it's like to work in a greenhouse or a nursery of any kind in a Florida summer. I myself have experience working at a bonsai nursery down in South Florida. And even though I got to be indoor most of the time because I was doing a lot of their website stuff, it was incredible, the dedication of the staff all summer who's working out there, growing, sweating. I mean, it is the most incredible dedication I've seen to work in that kind of heat and every day and just care so much about those plants. So that is a really, really big thing that I think a lot of people don't know.
And one of the things we...
Florida.
And I know that specifically. I don't think I've mentioned her in any other like press or anything like that. But Michelle, there's a woman who's worked for Gabriella Growers, the wholesale business, and obviously still is working with us now, named Michelle. And she's by far the MVP. I made a joke that I was going to make Employee of the Month retroactively for like the past 3 years and just have a million pictures of her on the wall. Who's been working in plants across 3 different greenhouses in her career, and has chosen to stay working with us despite us being about a 40-minute drive from where she lives. But she is so hardworking and is out there in the dead of heat. And, we would say, you want to take a break? All of us are in there, panting in the office going, do we have to go back out there? Does anyone have any more Gatorade?
Totally. Totally.
She comes in just to wash her hands in the bathroom and then kind of looks at us and smirks. She's just such an incredible worker. But one of the things that I wanted to do for her specifically and why I brought her up is I know that those summers are so hot, and specifically, watering things, moving things from bench to bench, although those tasks are still in the exact same temperatures, they're not nearly as bad because you're getting to move. You're moving, you're moving between greenhouses, so you got the breezes. But when you're standing at a station and all you're doing is propagating plants for 8 hours, and you're standing in the same spot, whether or not you have a fan at that spot, that's a long time to stand in one place. That's so
absolutely
hot. So we actually dedicated a third of the space in our new building. I've named it the Michelle Bay, which has its own sort of roll-up doors and whatnot. And we intentionally designed there to be a drain in the concrete slab. We can bring in filled pots for her to propagate with. And she can work in there in the air conditioning. And the only step that we would have to do back out in the greenhouse is just setting those plants back out on benches. So I do want to, it's not something we can 100% avoid, but my goal is to take some of the tasks that at any other greenhouse would just be the definition of brutal and would be the definition of burning out an employee and say, hey, do it in here. And there's plenty of space for upwards of 3 people to work in there at the same time. And like I said, it's all going to be air conditioned and climate controlled. So I think that's really important that I think growers moving forward have that in mind, because a lot of greenhouses, we've always provided free Gatorade, we've always provided free water, and some of those basic things aren't even available at other nurseries. But we really care about the employees and want to make sure they're set up for success. And if part of that is removing some of those hottest months, that was something that was high on my priority list when I was looking at designing a building.
That's so important. And like I said, I'll say it a million times, especially for anyone who's worked outdoors in the summer or even tried to garden outdoor in the summer. It's just very, very brutal in Florida. So that is super inspiring. And honestly, that's one of the first times I've even heard that become a priority for a nursery establishment or for growers, to get their employees in somewhere that is less brutal, especially during those summer months.
It's particularly terrible from about 11 a.m. to 3:30. So even if you can have, your kind of time allocated throughout the day, that in the morning when things are cool, you're out gathering the cuttings you need, you're out, filling the pots you need, whatever. And then just eliminating those 4 hottest hours in the middle of the day, that is a huge thing. And that was my main goal with making that space.
Wow, that's just really, really incredible. So you guys are planning to be in there by November? Is that your goal?
Once we get power, we're going to be moving in. So hopefully in the next 2 weeks or so is the current timeline I've been given. But as I've learned through this building process, don't trust a single timeline. Everything's going to take twice as long as what they say it's going to take.
That is absolutely true with construction.
And it's the same with plants too. You're like, you're like, how long could this possibly take to root in? I'm going to tell the customer 6 weeks. Plant's like, I've got a joke. I'm going to take 12 weeks, so
totally. That even happens sometimes. That even happens sometimes when I have a leaf unfurling. I'm like, oh, this is going to be open and within like the next 4 days.
Tomorrow morning, it's going to be great.
Yes. And then like 2 weeks later, I'm like still staring at it. I'm like, are you ever going to open? What is happening?
A watched pot never boils, right?
It's so true. It's true in every aspect. I actually don't have a pink princess yet. It is on my list, of course. But one reason that I haven't purchased a pink princess personally is because I was under the impression they specifically revert back pretty quickly. And because of that, we know that any type of variegation is a mutation, and a mutation that we are trying desperately to contain and to keep replicating. But can we clear some air on pink princesses reverting?
Yeah, it's definitely a really common question. Because there's a lack of them on the market, there's a lot of people trying to sell what I wouldn't sell as a pink princess as a pink princess. And for those people who purchase those, I'm sorry. But the thing about reversion is pretty simple. If the plant is producing healthy variegation, if you are receiving a plant, whether it's from us or from somebody else, where, there's good pink in the stem, there's good pink in the leaves, it's just a good amount of variegation, excuse me. If there's a good amount of variegation there, there really isn't going to be a problem with reversion in a very short window of time, unless the plant experiences something stressful, which could be too much light, too little light. I would say humidity, but pink princess aren't like at the level of like a calathea in humidity needs. So it would have to be, really left out in the desert to actually have problems from humidity, to the point that they take on, they go into emergency mode. And that's most of your reversion on any variegated plant. When it starts to revert, it's mainly because the plant's like, hold up. My primary purpose is to put out new, beautiful leaves. And its definition of beautiful leaf is a large, healthy leaf that's thick enough, and conveniently, they leave out the part about the variegation. They're just concerned about having those solar panels we talked about earlier. So if they're experiencing too much light or too little light, they're going to start just saying, forget the variegated part. Let's just focus on making some healthy, all burgundy leaves. So the major thing that I would say about pink princess, and I think this is what your question is alluding to, the way to tell if you're going to have sudden problems with variegation or even long-term problems with variegation levels outside of, like I said, something where it's like an extra normal stressful event for them, because that can trigger it regardless of what I'm about to say. But if it's living its normal life day to day, it's been happy in your home, if there is pink veins or pink that is still heavily involved in the petrol or the stem of the plant, that is a very good sign for future variegation. Even if you have a leaf that does not contain as much pink variegation, if that continuation of the stem continues to have that healthy pink, you're most likely going to see that amount of variegation pick back up in the future. The pink in the stem is certainly the way to tell the health of how much variegation it can produce moving forward. And with that also being said, if you do have a plant where when you got it, there was 4 leaves on the bottom, the stem, super pink. I mean, just beautiful, right? And then you did accidentally kind of put it, I don't ever recommend people put pink princesses in windows. I understand that South and West in different parts of the country may not get direct sunlight, but the area closest to your window is going to be a lot of light and is also going to be fairly dry air, because the process of
Yes.
perfection. So I always said, don't put it near a window. But if you've had it near a window, it kind of went through its problem. You figured out later, it was because of too much light, and it produced 1 or 2 burgundy leaves. And in the process of that reversion that you experienced, the pink is no longer in the stem. The good news for you is the pink is still in the stem at the bottom of the plant because it was there at the beginning. So if you do experience a traumatic related reversion, you can cut the plant back down to the height at which variegation was present in the stem. And that should give you a solid 50-50 roll of the dice as to whether or not you can get good variegation to come out of that exact same plant again. Because just because the plant experienced trauma once doesn't mean it cannot go back to it if at one point there was the pink in the stem.
So stems are really what we're looking at for variegation. And in regards to Pink Princess's reverting, what we would want to do is look at our stem and go down to the most variegated spot and trim back to there, because that's going to give us the highest chance at a variegated leaf output.
Correct. Now, if the entire plant has minimal to no variegation in the stem, there's not a whole lot you can do to artificially induce the variegation. There's some people would say, add increased light, which is true to a certain extent because the plant is going to prioritize producing less variegation if the solar panels aren't able to pick up enough light. So if it wasn't a super dark environment, it may begin to revert simply out of desperation to get the solar panels at working. But you're 100% correct in that summary that if there is good variegation present in the stem further down the plant, you can trim back to where the variegation once was. The only thing I would add to that, and I know I'm long-winded, it runs in the family, but the only thing I would add to the stem situation is when you do trim it all the way back and you roll those dice, I would say it's probably better than 50-50 chance, but I don't want to say exactly what success is not guaranteed. You got to
totally,
plant, and you got to have fun with it too. And that's the other thing is, don't worry quite as much, just have fun and see what the plant does. And if you need to get a new plant, you can get a new plant, but at least have fun while you're doing it. If you do trim the plant back though, be prepared that particularly the first leaf out, because it will take it probably a month before you see any signs of new growth. And then slowly one day you'll see just a tiny little leaf starting to creep out from somewhere in that stem. And that's the new stem it's trying to form. Generally speaking, that first leaf that is added to that fresh new stem from where you cut it, that leaf is probably not going to contain good variegation, but the stem most likely will. So it's all right if that first leaf does not contain a beautiful, big, half-moon pink leaf, because the plant is having to go through so much energy to produce an entirely new stem. It had worked its entire life getting the one stem it already had.
Yeah.
And then that got ripped away from it. So it's like, oh God, we got to start this thing all over again. So it puts so much energy into producing just that first leaf and that first stem and the first, petrol covering it before it unfurls and all that stuff, that first leaf is probably not going to have a whole lot of variegation to it because it needs a new solar panel. It lost how many leaves on the top of that plant that you caught, that you trimmed off?
Absolutely.
It needs a good solar panel, but keep an eye on the variegation in the stem from the new stem that begins to emerge, because you'll probably see good, healthy variegation in the second and third leaves. That, even from our experience growing and selling them, that is our experience, is that when I plant what everyone else would call an insanely highly variegated cutting, the first leaf is typically not very variegated, but the leaves that follow that first leaf begin to pick up that variegation that matches relatively what the cutting was stuck originally.
And in your guys' process, you have also coined the term Ruby Princess. Is that correct?
Burgundy
Princess.
Burgundy, because the Pink Princess have a burgundy color to them already. That's kind of their reverted color. Now, there is a Philodendron Royal Queen, which is a established species, which has the burgundy color. It also has a slightly more pointed leaf. It has a slightly different leaf shape, but it has that same deep burgundy color. But there are a number of Pink Princess for us that don't either revert slightly or for whatever reason do not completely match the standards at which we would ship a Pink Princess. So that can range from basically no Pink Princess, no pink in it whatsoever, or very, very minimal, to what some would consider a pretty decent amount of variegation, but still not up to our standard of a full-blown Pink Princess. Those plants we sell under the name Burgundy Princess, because when I was debating what to list them on the website as, because they're still a beautiful plant, they're a healthy plant, they look amazing, but I wanted to reduce the price tag on them. But I also wanted to not have people say, I got this Pink Princess, a Burgundy, from Gabriella Plants, and have people assume that all of the Pink Princess we ship contain that much variegation. So for Pink Princess that are either completely reverted or, 60% or more reverted, we do go through the process of selling those as Burgundy Princess.
I love that because like you were talking about earlier, it's just about having fun with it and enjoying it. And something should not be discarded because it's not what it's expected to be when it's still a beautiful plant that could definitely make you happy and take up a beautiful space in your home.
Yeah. And the discarded thing you mentioned, and I mentioned this in another interview, that's the reason why Pink Princess and variegated monsteras and the plants in that category with natural mutations that are also hard to replicate at commercial scale are so rare at this moment. That is only because growers were saying, what do you mean if I plant Pink Princess cuttings, the first leaf out of 60% of them is not going to look super great? I don't want to grow that. And they would either throw away the Burgundies or in a lot of cases, growers just kind of abandoned the Pink Princess, Variegated Monstera, all those plants altogether because they were just simply too much work and too many man hours to sit there and determine whether a plant was going to look good in the future, or if it wasn't, then they were going to throw it in a trash can. And growers were like, how many of these can I stand to throw in a trash can before I give up on it? And all of those sequence of events led to those plants being so rare because commercial growers had just simply given up.
Wow. It's crazy to know the backstory of that. It's crazy that we both created the lack of supply and we created the demand.
Right. Yeah. At the same time. And, I can understand it from a grower's perspective. There are plants on average, I can grow one batch of Pink Princess in the time that I could grow 2 batches of essentially any other plant in our greenhouse. So I can understand growers that were commercial wholesale growers who said, nah, I'd much rather have 2 times the number of plants I can produce in the same span of time than work on these Pink Princess, particularly when the plant phenomenon hadn't really exploded yet. There wasn't all these groups and podcasts and amazing communities out there yet who would appreciate these plants. And it was a really tough sell to tell, Sarah's Garden Center, you want to pay to you an extremely high price for a plant. Some people were bound to know in Kansas that they're worth something, right? Like that was a really hard sell to those smaller garden centers.
Yeah.
Before the explosion of the popularity of houseplants again.
I'm curious, of your overall sales, what percentage do Pink Princesses make up?
I would say the Pink Princess sales make up less than 10% of our total sales. They make up a far smaller fraction of the number of plants that we ship in a given year. We're only going to have sold and shipped by the end of this year. By the end of 2019, we're going to have sold and shipped around 1,100 Pink Princess, and we're going to have sold and shipped about 22 to 25,000 other plants. So by far, it's not a huge portion of the business and we're, as far as I know, one of the largest, if not the largest, probably before the 2018 purge with everyone buying them. All of a sudden, we were the largest grower of Pink Princess. I don't really know that or have any way to verify that now, but we do have a fairly large collection. There's not many being produced elsewhere. And we're still only able to produce 1,100 this year. So that kind of puts into perspective how rare these things are, even for us. And I know you say a customer can say 1,100. Well, then why not make it 1,101 and include me? And the thing to realize is when we had a wait list, if you combine the total number of people who sat on our wait list and the people who, since we closed our wait list, have sat and used our system on our website to be notified when we do restock them in the future, you're looking at somewhere around 6,000 interested people. And that's with no outside marketing, no really drawing attention to it. It just kind of being there and existing. So the supply certainly doesn't meet the demand on a plant like that.
And you guys are trying hard.
It's the thing. Every single Pink Princess we ship and sell, and Burgundy Princess, every step of that process is done by myself. So I'm very intimately involved in the production schedules, in the logs of what was planted when, and it's my say goes on what gets planted as cuttings and also what gets sold as a Pink Princess and what gets sold as a Burgundy.
Now, what would you say is the rarest plant that you guys have on property, whether or not it's for sale?
Well, as of a month ago, a couple weeks ago, we had my assistant manager, Bruce. I don't know, we're not big on titles. He technically is our shipping manager, but in the last couple of weeks, he's really been stepping over and helping in a variety of different operational senses, because he actually was first working in the greenhouse when we were in high school together. So he's been around for a while and knows a lot, but he was pulling, we call it pulling, when we select the plants out of the greenhouse and we store them in the first greenhouse to isolate them and make sure that the packing team knows where they're located when it's time to ship those plants. And he was going through some of our tetrasperma we had grown from tissue culture. We grew them throughout late summer. We're out of them at this point, not sure what we're going to have in the future. We are growing some additional ones from cuttings we saved. But for now, those are sold out. But he found one of the remaining ones had a very nice, healthy amount of increasing variegation from leaf to leaf up this one particular plant. And as far as we know, it's the only variegated tetrasperma to have white variegation. There have been a couple others, even a YouTube video on one that was a green on green variegation. This is the first one to have white. And not only, going back to our conversations about stems, it's all in the stems, right?
It has just a huge, beautiful vein right up it, I saw online.
It's got a beautiful streak of white variegation the entire length. So he noticed that. It was a day that I wasn't in, and the very next morning, he's like, man, I got to show you this. And of course, we posted it on our social media accounts, and that kind of blew up. It's not for sale. It's our only one. We will eventually, at this point, if you are able to see a picture of it, which you can see if you go to our Instagram at Gabriella Plants online. In the most recent photo we posted today, October 25th, or maybe it was yesterday, you can see it's on the left side, the leaves that are on the left side of the stem, each leaf from the very bottom of the pot, and then it puts one out on the right, and then another one on the left side. All four in corresponding order up the growth of this plant have not only the same variegation present in the same quadrant of the leaf, where it's the top right, but it's getting bigger. It's a bigger portion of the leaf, each and every leaf. So at this point, I have no plans on trimming it or trying to propagate it. I will long term, but I'm really curious to see where this thing ends up, because I think it's going to be absolutely astounding. I'm definitely going to work on this weekend getting it on a totem or something so we can encourage it to get height and gain leaf size a little bit, because it's quite pot bound in its pot right now. But yeah, that's definitely the most rare plant, because as far as I'm aware, it's the only one in the world at this point that is being isolated and constantly kept and looked after. So there may be several others that have lesser or more variegation, because those tetraspermas are a plant that, although they do not contain variegation typically, they're produced via tissue culture, which is essentially cloning in a lab. It's a very complicated process, and I don't have a white lab coat nor really the expertise to explain that process. But
super difficult technology.
Yeah, well above my pay grade. And during that process, you're cloning a plant in what's known as in vitro. And during those processes, obviously the tissue culture labs do everything they can to make sure everything's sterile, make sure, all the, conditions and variables are very monitored and are consistent. But there are known mutations that can happen when that process of cloning is happening at almost a single cell level. They're cloning plants that you and I can't even pick up. They're so small. And they're, literally using tweezers. So at some point, most likely, there was some type of issue during that process that led to the mutation. And most of the time, those tissue culture labs will actually, if they know a mutation has occurred, they will remove that and oftentimes throw it away, believe it or not, but they'll remove that because that's not what they're selling their customers. But this one happened to sneak through. We actually had 3 different ones from the same tray in the same row. We later figured out that had this particular variegation. The other 2 had it present on one leaf and no white in the stem, and it hasn't reappeared since. So this is the only one that we know of that has a increasingly white variegation on Tetrasperma.
And they are all variegated on the left side and all green on the right side. That is just going to be the most incredible plant as it continues to grow and grow. I can't even imagine how majestic it's going to be.
Oh, yeah.
Just being variegated on the one side and green on the other, just incredible.
I've joked around on Instagram. I feel like I need a safe. Like it's got to be made out of glass or something, because I can't just put it in like our safe that we have. You know what I mean? Like I got to have like something that could actually keep it growing. But there's certainly the first day we posted on Instagram, I think the second comment was like, I'll give you $1,000 cash for it right now. And I was like, whoa, buddy. Whoa. This is a cool plant. I'm going to hang on to this cool plant.
And I have a feeling it could go for a lot more than that.
Oh, I'm sure. But I've tried to expand not only what we're growing and the number of species we're growing commercially or for sale, but also just slowly adding, I am good friends with and really adore Enid with NSE Tropicals and several other growers out there. So when I can, I try to stock their restocks and grab additional plants that we don't have, even if it's just getting one of them, because, we have a greenhouse in Florida where these plants love it.
Where things love to grow.
So I would love to at some point have a bigger walk-throughable space of not only rare plants, but also just a much wider plethora of philodendrons, anthuriums, all the different aeroids. And that's certainly a goal of mine.
So you would say that those are some wish list plants for you going into the greenhouse?
Oh, yeah. And some of them I already do have. And, I do have a variegated Monstera. There's been a long process. I keep our behind the scenes group updated with its monthly progress. So I do have one of those, but, I'm always trying to see what's odd out there. And a lot of times those oddball ones are ones that growers don't really, they can't sell to a normal garden center. So not that they would throw it away, but if you're willing to make them an offer, sometimes you can get really cool stuff. So
for some people, it's just taking up space and resources.
Or not having, a staff that understands how to take care of a plant that needy.
Absolutely.
The commercial growers are kind of in a world of their own as being a commercial grower. But, that there's a plethora of reasons why they would choose to get rid of something like that. But I'm always trying to add something else to the collection for sure.
So what are some future ambitions and things that we can expect to unfold for Gabriella Plants online in 2020?
A lot more plants. And it's been a tiring year just with everything and the growth we've experienced. And I'm grateful for everybody who's trusted us with their orders and have been an encouragement and sharing us with their friends. Lots of cool things, both technologically, as far as just one thing that's always bugged me since the start, but I'm also just one man with a limited amount of time. I want to have better, care resources, growing tips for all the plants we grow. Right now, we really just have that in printed form for kind of the higher dollar items like Pink Princess Silver Swords. We do have care information for, but a good portion of the other plants on the website currently don't have that. So I do not only want to create, updated product listings on the website with all that information, but also physical cards that can go in those boxes, and additional video content regarding the care of some of those plants. So that's probably the biggest goal in my mind, is just to be a better resource to the community, not just as a place to buy plants, but also as a place to get information about the plants that you purchased. So that's one big thing. The other, I'll share this because this is probably not going to happen, but you said ambitious. I'll figure out a way one day. I promise you. I promise you, Shai. I will figure this out. But I want to put a camera on the front and the back of every bench, which are 48 feet long, and wire them up to some type of database. I'm a brainiac, computer whiz guy.
I'm loving this. I want
them all to feed time-lapse, hour-by-hour photos into a database.
Yes.
And then once you purchase a plant, the email that your receipt contains, the photo of the plant is no longer the product listing, but is a GIF of the last 3 months of that plant growing in our care. And then it pauses on the product image. Just to re-emphasize the fact that you're buying a plant that was growing in this greenhouse. And I think that would be really cool, just having more time-lapse footage, because on a week-to-week basis, and I don't think this is a bad thing in any way, but customers and ourselves as well, we're very focused on the task list for that week. What's going to be in the inventory update that week? And that's what our customers are focused on. What are you going to have that I can give you my money for? But things like showing how long a plant takes is something that can often be overlooked. So if I had an ideal world or an idea ambition, it would certainly be to be able to have generated GIFs of plants growing in our care. And I do think at some point we'll probably, in 2020, not sure when, we'll most likely venture into either more of a pop-up style shop, more of a in-person retail. I have an idea to create a greenhouse in a school bus, like basically just take off the roof of a school bus, turn it into a greenhouse, and make that kind of like a traveling thing.
Wow, that's so cool.
That could go to multiple different cities across the Southeast, and have limited availability of plants at a really good deal, and just kind of be more of an experience, the fact that it's a full greenhouse on a bus.
Well, that GIF idea, I have to say, just absolutely exploded my techie soul. I love the idea of getting a little GIF of the plant growing and actually getting to watch it. I don't even know where that idea came from, but that was absolutely genius.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool. And the other thing it shows you is the relative size of the batch, because oftentimes, we can't have a GIF of each individual plant. That would be super, hard to do.
Right. But seeing the small batch it grows in.
Right. But seeing those 200 plants that were all planted at the same size, seeing their height over, and I'm sure we'd find a way to put a timestamp in the bottom right. So, it really just puts more context into the thing we like to call growing, because that's what we do. But, hey, look at the timestamp of what this gift started. That was 4 months ago. And now they're tall enough that Gabriella is going to sell them.
And that's a huge aspect, too, of the plant industry that I think as a consumer that you're really detached from, is how long that process took, whether it was from cutting or seed or however that particular plant needs to, be propagated, or the fastest way to propagate it. But even in the fastest and best case scenario, still how long it takes for a plant to be established enough in a 4 or even 6-inch pot before it can be shipped. That's a long process.
And what we've always done, and I have no intentions of changing this, is a cutting that is well rooted is not a plant I'm willing to ship, because we ship in our nursery pots. We're fully certified to ship to all 50 states. We have the extra, stamps and inspections to be able to ship into California, which a number of online vendors don't choose to do. And we have all of those nursery stock inspections and stuff that lets us ship in pots to all continental 50 states. So not only are we looking for the cutting itself to have produced healthy roots, but I need that root system to be developed enough to hold the soil of the entire pot together. So that can kind of raise the bar of how long it takes us to grow something compared to somebody who's just trying to propagate a few cuttings and sell the cuttings that have begun the rooting process. Shipping in pots, the grow time is much longer because we need it to actually incorporate all the soil of that pot.
And like you said, that can vary species to species on how long that can actually take.
And Hoyas are not aggressive rooters. So,
not at all.
The bar for a Hoya is, hey, if you can root through halfway down the pot, I'm happy. Even if that means technically it's not fully rooted to the complete bottom of the pot. The pot's, how many inches tall? It takes them a long time just to get snug enough. But if we can't, tip it upside down and pull on different cuttings and get them to come out individually from one another, that starts putting them on our radar as ones that should be ready soon. But you're right, different plants take different amounts of time, and thus, depending on the plant, the standards can vary a little bit. Like I mentioned with Hoya, we may not wait for it to get entirely rooted to the bottom of the pot like we would a Syngonium or a hybrid Philodendron or something like that.
As a nursery grower, I'm curious if you and your wife grow plants at home.
It's quite embarrassing, but not very well. I just attribute that to how much time
being at work.
Yeah, how much time I spend at quote unquote work watering plants. We don't have a extensive collection here, and I have given zero effort into maintaining a good houseplant collection. My wife has tried off and on. She's done really well with some plants, struggled with others, but I think that's mainly because all my prized possession. The Variegated Monstera we have at the greenhouse is mine personally. I pay for that personally. So I have my own little collection on a specific bench that have all my plants that I'm working on. So I take good care of them in that context and understand that that's the environment in which they, prefer to live in. So I definitely don't have anything rare growing at the house. The things that we do have are some of the aglaonemas, some of the more common Pothos Philodendron, the ones that are much easier to care for in an indoor environment. And the harder stuff just stays at the greenhouse.
I'm a huge advocate for knowing what kind of plant parent you are and really understanding that to a deep level. If you're somebody who's at work, but really particularly nursery growers, people who grow plants at work all the time, if that's where you are, a lot of times, and that's of course, like you said, a happy environment for plants, especially in Florida, knowing that they're living their best life there and that's the best place that you can give them attention and care for them. It's just really important to know that about yourself and know where your limitations are so all your plants can be happy too.
Yeah. And that may be an experience that other consumers or other people in the country have. You may kind of figure out that plants are never really my thing because, I've just tried to put 5 different plants in this one spot in my formal dining room, and it's just not close to a window, and I just seem to kill everything. Yeah, it's all right. Put a fake plant there. It'll crush your soul a little bit, but you can do it. And, if that means that because you're passionate about plants, but the plants that you want to take care of just simply don't do well, given your house architecture, your house environment, build the greenhouse outside, get a small greenhouse, explore your passion and recognize that just because places like us and other vendors sell them as house plants, they can also be your greenhouse plants too. If you want to get a greenhouse or something,
absolutely,
that's a better environment for those plants. Because if you're passionate about it, give them what they want.
And when your plants are happy, legitimately, you are more happy. Everybody knows it.
Oh yeah.
If there is one piece of advice you could impart on the audience today, what would it be?
The one thing I can say is be ready for the challenges and don't let them depress you to a high level. And the reason I say that is the best thing you can do if you're passionate about plants in general, not necessarily professionally, is spend more time with them, get more plants, care for more plants, because you're not going to be able to maintain your hobby and your passion and never experience a bug or never experience putting a plant in a window it shouldn't have been. You're never going to not experience those things. So don't let those things terrify you into choosing a plant or not choosing a plant just because it's prone to spider mites. Well, start learning how to take care of them. There are options out there and resources out there. Don't be afraid of any specific plant. Within reality, if you can't grow a banana in Wisconsin, but if it's a plant that you're passionate about, don't let others tell you whether or not they think you're capable of it, because I believe in you. And I think that you can find the resources out there on the internet, ask the right questions to find the answers you're looking for.
I agree 100%. And I always tell people, that you're always going to learn through your challenges. You're going to get bugs and you're going to repot something, a cutting too soon, or maybe repot something that you didn't know gets traumatized in that kind of transition. There's so many different plants, and this community is growing at such a fast rate that the best thing you can do is put your hands in some dirt and watch your plants and see them grow, because it's just that seeing them every day that you start to see their growth habits, and you start to learn so much about them. And I just agree 100%. A lot of people might kill a plant and then get discouraged, but it's really important to just keep growing and keep putting your hands in the dirt and keep getting plants.
Yeah, don't be afraid to get another one, because like you said, everyone's going to experience bugs, and that advice is the same whether you're a retail consumer or a customer, or you're a potential professional grower in the future. Either way, you're going to pretty much experience every bug out there. We do our best to make sure we don't ship any and take care of people if and when things slip through the cracks, because those things happen. Not often, thankfully. We have people who care and make sure that people are getting healthy plants, but those bug problems are going to happen. And the sooner you can get those experiences, like you said, oh, well, I learned that you can't repot that quite as quick as I thought you could. You can only learn that lesson one way. So don't be afraid to buy a second plant of the plant that you previously killed. Do more research maybe before, buying it, or whatever you need to do to make sure that you feel, equipped to take care of it. But give it another go, because you're going to learn a lot, not only about the plant that you're struggling with or the bug that you're struggling with at that time, but you're going to learn a lot about everything else in between about that plant on the way. If you're constantly monitoring for bugs on a specific plant, you're probably going to notice tiny little aerial roots on stems that you didn't think were big enough to have aerial roots yet. You're going to notice beautiful parts of creation that you wouldn't notice otherwise, other than the fact that you may be dealing with something negative like a bug. So don't let the negativity pull you away from the beauty of what's unfolding before you, and don't let it discourage you from buying the plants again.
I've seen that happen so many times, and it's even happened for me personally many, many years ago, long before I was a botanist. I was also a plant killer, and I got my first peace lily, and I obviously did not water it enough. Anybody who's had a peace lily has probably seen its dramatic show.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has been probably 12 years since I've had a peace lily, and I have it's been one of my least favorite plants. I swore I would never, ever, ever, ever get another peace lily. And then a month and a half ago, I was at a local greenhouse, and they had the most beautiful variegated peace lily. I mean, it was so gorgeous. Some of all half leaves, and it was just so phenomenal that I had to have it. I was like, I cannot believe I'm going to buy this peace lily when I can't even stand this plant, but this one is so beautiful. So I brought it home, and I'm real into variegated plants. So that's really kind of what struck me about it. And the first thing I did was put it too close to the window and burnt one of the most beautiful leaves. And I was like, gosh, dang it. So I moved it away from the window, and it has just been absolutely thriving. I know what care it needs, and I have been paying extra attention to it to get in the flow of what it really requires. And then last week, someone messaged me on Instagram and gave me a 15-year-old peace lily, this huge peace lily from their grandmother's house, gave it to me. And I brought it home, and it takes up like a quarter of the living room. It's so big, and it's so gratifying. Now, looking back, I was just talking to my husband, I used to kill this plant every time I brought one home. And now we have these big, beautiful ones that are so showy in our house, and they bring us so much joy. And you can totally flip the script on that just by giving something another chance.
Yeah, 100%. And one more pro tip, I thought of while you were saying that. One pro tip for anybody who thinks that they maybe just have bad luck with plants. One thing to realize is that a good majority of plants that are on the market, particularly the ones from Home Depot, Lowe's, and the big box stores, will be fertilized their entire growing life in a greenhouse via fertilizer being injected into the water that is administered to the plants. And that means when you get that home and you're just administering normal water, you may not be providing the nutrients that the plant has otherwise been accustomed to. So in our nursery, we use a time-released fertilizer. The name brand NutriCoat or Osmocoat are two of the biggest, which has a special coating on it that they're little beads. They almost look like nerd candy in a way. And every time water comes into contact with those, they release a small amount of nutrients. So if you see those little beads in a plant from us, or even some other plants at smaller mom and pop shops, that's what that is. When you can completely pop them and there's nothing inside other than just strictly water, you know the nutrients have been spent. But if you don't see any other type of additive in the soil, like those little beads, most likely you need to either get in the habit of watering with water-soluble fertilizer for foliage, which you can find at Ace, Home Depot, Amazon, whatever, and do that once a month, or administer your own fertilizer, because a lot of plants that come out of stores may not have the nutrients they need for months to come. So definitely be on the lookout for that and make sure you're giving enough nutrients to the plants you have. I would say that's probably the easiest, but also one of the less thought of professional tips towards buying plants and making sure they do well in your care.
Absolutely. And that is especially expanded to people. I see a lot of hydroton and things like that right now, where people are doing like hydroponic or semi-hydroponic growing situations as well.
Is that how you say it?
Those, yes, the leca balls. And they are completely devoid of organic nutrients. So that's not to say don't grow in them, because I'm also experimenting with them. You know, it's great to try different kinds of soils for different types of plants and stuff, but keeping in mind that things like that have no organic nutrient whatsoever in the soil, definitely fertilizer amendments are a huge thing. And you can go anywhere from synthetic fertilizers all the way to organic fertilizers, and there's all kinds of ways to do that. But and definitely check your plants as well, because I do have certain plants like bird of paradise. If you over fertilize, get burnt. So keep in mind,
you don't just want to always fertilize, but it is something to be aware of, that depending on the vendor, even within the same mom and pop garden center, you don't know which greenhouse grew which one of those plants. So just get to know each plant individually and keep an eye out for granular fertilizers. And if there isn't, most likely that means that they were using, water soluble fertilizer at the greenhouse they grew up at. So you could go to,
that plant's probably hungry.
Yeah, you could go to a granular. There's nothing wrong with transitioning from, just to make sure that nobody misunderstands that. You can go from granular to using water soluble. You can go from them being water soluble and add your own granular fertilizer. That's not a problem.
Absolutely.
But what you're saying, definitely want to check which one is needed, because this specific plants, and a decent amount of plants actually, don't like too much nutrients. So you want to make sure you know what's going on. I'm not saying just fertilize every new plant that comes into your collection.
Yes, but that's an absolutely huge point. A lot of people think my plant needs sunshine and it needs water and it needs soil in a pot, but the contents of the soil and pot, we don't think about the macro and micronutrients. Just like humans need macro and micronutrients in our diet to survive, plants need the same thing.
Absolutely.
So where can we continue to support Gabriella Plants online and follow your guys' journey as you guys progress into the new year?
Yeah, well, I'll definitely be excited to continue to listen to your podcast as well. Thanks for having me on. You guys have, I think you're doing, when we spoke the other day on the phone, I made sure to make clear to you that I think you're doing a great thing in helping to kind of not only with interviews, but also just general resources about the plant community and about the perspective of different growers and sellers and things. Because I think that in the insane rush that has happened over plants, I think some of those things are the things that get overlooked. So I really like what you're doing. As far as following along with us, like I mentioned earlier, we do have regular inventory updates at this time of this recording, which is October 25th. We do them every single Wednesday at 8 o'clock Eastern time. We will announce a graphic on social media, which you can find us on Facebook under Gabriella Plants, or you can find us on Instagram, Gabriella Plants Online. And we release those graphics that have what plants we're going to be restocking. And if you can't find them at 7:50, that's because they're hidden to make it fair. And at 8 o'clock, they'll all appear. And it's first come, first serve. There's no holding cart functionality or anything like that. So you have to complete your checkout in order to secure the plant. It can be quite a mad rush at times. There may be more people than we have plants, but we do them every Wednesday. Other than that, we try to stay active on social media. I try to keep our stories and things interesting about progress going on, not only with specific plants, but also just the life of the greenhouse. And the last thing I would say as far as following us specifically is if you find our Facebook page, Gabriella Plants, there is a Facebook group called Gabriella Plants Behind the Scenes. It's got about 2,500 people in it right now. And that is kind of my favorite group right now. And they are a great resource, not only to help answer some questions, whether it's a Gabriella plant or not a Gabriella plant. The whole community exists there, but also I go into that group specifically with poll questions and just kind of taking the temperature of different ideas we did. They helped kind of modify what hoodies we did in our latest merch run. So all kinds of fun stuff that goes on there that I pretty much only share there. So you definitely want to join that group. You have to ask to be joined, and then I have to approve you. But ask to be in that group because that's certainly where some of the behind the scenes content goes.
That's awesome. And that seems like a real tight-knit way of keeping up with you guys. And just for our listeners, check your time zones because 8 o'clock is no joke when those plants go online. I checked at 8 o'clock. I don't know what I was thinking, Alaska time, which was just not right at all. But by the time I did get on there, all the main plants were gone. You guys had been wiped clean. So definitely get your plants fast on Wednesday nights.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do occasionally do some at other times. Like last week, we did a special one on Friday at 3 p.m. So it's more, in the middle of the day for West Coasters or morning for West Coast. Yeah, it's no joke there. I think this past Wednesday, we had 5 items that all sold out within 60 seconds. So, and it wasn't 3 plants.
I bet I know what those ones were because I was probably looking for
you probably were. And all 3 of those that sold out had 50 plants of each species. So it wasn't like we had 2 and just 2 lucky people got it, and I realized 50 may not be a ton, but in comparison to what we can ship in a week, if we put 50 of a plant out there, it's pretty insane to me and humbling to me. And I'm very thankful for the fact that it sells out that quickly. It's still just staggering to me, the amount of support we've received. And I'll forever be grateful to people like you and to all the people who have chosen to support us along our journey.
Absolutely.
And I just have one more thing to note. If any of the listeners are thinking about making an order, heat pack or not, you can use the code JUNGLE on the website at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And we're happy to do that in collaboration with you. So if you're thinking about giving us a shot, want to see these pack by cards yourself, you can use that code at GabriellaPlants.com, the code JUNGLE, to get 10% off anything in stock.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
And I will definitely be using that jungle discount. I'm so appreciative.
Of course. Well, I hope you have a wonderful night. And thank you again for what you're doing. I think it's a wonderful service to the plant community. And I can't wait to listen to future episodes as well.
I don't know about you all, but I very often find that the care I'm giving my plants is in direct correlation to the care I'm giving myself. It was my goal to leave you with an inspired new way to look at plant care and self-care, so we can begin to see that the way we care for one aspect of our lives is truly the way we care for all aspects of our lives. My challenge for you this week is to take a photo of your plant care or self-care routine and tag me at Among the Jungle Podcast. And then follow Aloha Shy and Among the Jungle Podcast on Instagram. You can find the show notes for this episode and anything I recommended along the way at amongthejungle.com/010. And please, please, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share with all your favorite plant friends. I hope this episode inspired your wild, and I hope you see plants as our self-care mirrors, reflecting back to us which aspects of ourselves most need attention, care, love, and healing. Until next week, Jungle Dwellers, love, light, and aloha. I am so grateful to the plants that bless this beautiful earth, and to you for choosing to nurture a wild place inside of your heart. I hope this episode inspired your wild, and I'd love to hear your feedback, suggestions for future guests, and other botanical notes at amongthejungle.com or amongthejungle on Instagram. It's been lovely exploring this exotic world with you today, and I look forward to where the journey takes us next week. Mahalo for tuning in, and stay wild.